Hey there again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about natural selection. We're going to emphasize the natural selection today, but we're going to continue to talk about some of those main themes that we find in Darwin's theory of evolution. And so today we're going to talk about the different types of natural selection. So before we do that, let's take a step back. There's a couple things I want to definitely highlight in this video. Number one, what evolution is according to Charles Darwin. Everything I'm going to be saying is according to Charles Darwin's theory. I don't have to say that every time. This is all according to the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin. In his theory, he states that organisms change over time. Right? If you have little organisms or little changes over a long period of time, you can create all new species. And they will all go through changes, and they will kind of branch off into make new species and branch off here and then branch off here. And eventually you get this kind of almost tree of life that gives us our biodiversity, our diversity of life that we see today. Which means if we take all of these branches that we branched out off and kind of travel back, that we all came from a single common ancestor. Every living organism on this planet came from the single common ancestor, and as that first single cell prokaryote. All right. And then we've all branched off from there. Some organisms have branched off more recently. According to the theory, we branched off from primates more recently than we branched off from, horses, which we have. And we branched off from, horses branched off from all the way back down to plants. We all have things that we share in common with those things, which means we shared some sort of common ancestor on that. All right. But it's this idea of a change in species over time. And that change is caused by something called natural selection. All right. Now, natural selection is what is the mechanism that drives evolution. By that, I mean it's what causes evolution to happen, change to happen. And basically what it states is that any organism that has a trait that gives it an advantage to survive is more likely to gather resources, survive, reproduce, and pass on that favorable trait. If any organism has an unfavorable trait, is less likely to survive long enough to pass down that unfavorable trait, and that trait doesn't get passed down. And if enough time, that trait would disappear. Right? Because there would be no more of that trait, no one passing it down. All right. One major thing to understand about this, and I have to really stress this here, and is one of the biggest misconceptions about evolution, is that the individual does not change. The individual does not evolve. You don't evolve, I don't evolve, we don't evolve, according to Charles Darwin. All right. We have changes in our lives. I can get bigger and stronger. I can start running faster. It doesn't mean my kids will be that way, though. That was Lamarck's theory. All right. Darwin says we don't have, we believe in inherited traits that I can pass down, like my hair color, my skin color, eye color. All right. Even muscle development, right? That one can, but acquired traits during your life, like Lamarck, don't get passed down. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how this natural selection, this favorable versus unfavorable traits, there's different ways that can happen within a population. So the individual does not change. The individual cannot evolve. The only thing that can evolve is the population. And population is a group of organisms of the same species. You can go as small as literally the human population in Dublin, to the dog population on Earth. All right. And so whenever we see a change in the population, kind of as the group as a whole, then we have evolution occurs. And we normally can tell by when that change has occurred by the number of alleles or versions of a trait or population. That will be our next video talking about that. But today we're going to talk about the 3 types of natural selection, 3 ways that natural selection can cause evolution, a change in species. All right. Now, normally what I like to do with this is a little story. All right. Normally I have everyone get involved. We do some measurements and we own a story, and everyone's it's an interactive way to do it. But obviously we can't do that. But I still want to tell the story because it just does a very good job of explaining what's happening here. All right. Sometimes what was once a favorable trait can become unfavorable, and vice versa. And so these changes is what causes species to change over time. So let's do a little story here, and let's make sure you guys have your handy dandy notebooks, because we'll do kind of our notes along the way with it. So I'm going to use this little chart here to kind of go through this with me. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about the chart first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the chart, and then we'll talk a little bit about the story and how this natural selection can change. So what we have right here is we have a chart here that shows a population. We're in this story, we're going to be using the human population. All right, so on this one here, we have a phenotype range. All right, the range of a phenotype. My daughter has blue eyes and my dad had blue eyes, but they aren't the same color of blue. So just because we have traits that are similar in description doesn't mean there's not a range. We can have long arms and short arms, and that's the one we're going to be using this here. But there's a whole range in between. There isn't just everyone has 80 centimeter arms and everyone has or you have 60. There's a range in between to the hundredths of decimals places. All right, but we're going to keep this pretty straight. Normally, I would have you guys measure out your arm lengths, and that way we can use actual specific examples. But normally, the arm lengths will either be the really long arms, about 80 centimeters or so, and then the really short arms, which are 60 centimeters, and you know who you are, you 60 centimeter arm people. All right, and then we have the number of alleles within that population. All right, so the number of alleles, remember alleles being versions of the trait that we find in genes. All right, blue eyes, green eyes are alleles, different versions of the trait eye color. So 60 centimeter arms and 80 centimeter arms are different versions of the trait of arm length. All right, and we notice here that our initial population, the vast majority of the population has kind of an average arm length. There are some that have 60 and some that have 80, some longer, some shorter, but the vast majority of fit here. All right, so this is our human population on where our story begins. All right, our story begins not here, but in the beautiful paradise land known as Tiki-Tiki-Wan. Tiki-Tiki-Wan is a beautiful place with beautiful shores and sunshine every day, with wind blowing through the willows. It's just a beautiful place for people where they have different people, all different opinions and attitudes and different arm lengths, all the way from the itty bitty tiny arm people all the way to the Stretch Armstrong long armed people. And so humans are enjoying this beautiful paradise known as Tiki-Tiki-Wan. But unfortunately, they enjoyed it a little bit too much. And they took advantage of the environment. And because of that, it eventually led to drastic climate change. One day in Tiki-Tiki-Wan, it began to rain. And rain, and rain, and rain, and rain, and rain, and rain, and rain for dozens, then hundreds of years. The water level on the planet rose hundreds of feet high, till only the highest hills and the highest mountains were able to show as little islands all across this beautiful land with large amounts of ocean. And as this water level started to rise, it became very challenging for the population, because the waters started to get infested with sharks and alligators and organisms that could endanger them. So they had to figure out how to be able to move from one place to another. And so as the water levels were rising, the most brilliant minds decided to build, to connect the islands, a monkey bar superhighway, so that individuals could swing from one island to the next. Unfortunately, they had to make them only a certain distance apart, the monkey bars, to save resources. And so anyone who had about medium to long arms, definitely long-armed individuals, were going to do really well. Medium arm, we're going to do okay, maybe not as good as the long-arm people, but the short-arm people, sad story. Unfortunately, they were unable to survive. They just could not swing from monkey bar to monkey bar. And so what we would see in a shift in that time, all right, is we would see a shift in that population where the number of individuals that have that very, very short arm would start to go down, right? While on the other extreme, in this case here, the 80, we would see that population, because they're more likely to survive, less of these people are taking the food long enough. That means more food and resources for long-armed individuals. More likely they're going to survive. They're going to do much better. So we're going to see an increase for them over here. And the medium-armed people are going to do okay, but maybe, not all of them are going to do great, right? So their population might kind of shift a little bit. We'll say it just goes down a little bit here, right? And so what we see is, we see this shift in the curve where it moves in a single direction. All right. In this case here, it moved to one extreme. All right. In this case, it moved to the extreme of the longer arms. Those individuals are going to we potentially have evolution occurring. All right, because we are seeing a shift in the population, the number of alleles in that population. All right. These long arm people didn't grow longer arms in their lifetime. They were born with long arms. And these shorter arm peoples weren't able to just stretch out and get longer arms. They just had an unfavorable trait and thus were unable to survive. All right, this is natural selection. Those who have favorable traits are going to reproduce and pass down those traits. All right, in this case here, this is more specifically a type of natural selection called directional natural selection. This is one of the three. This is directional. It's called directional because it's shifting the curve in one direction. It could literally be going in this direction as well, but just the example I had. When you notice that the peak is basically moved in the phenotype range, where before the average was 70, and now the closer to the average is like 77. All right, this is an indicator that the phenotype range, or that directional natural selection has occurred. All right, so this is our first type of natural selection here. It is the shift in a single direction, or to one extreme of the phenotype, long arms, all right, in a single direction. We call that directional natural selection. So, okay, let's kind of reset a little bit here. All right, over time, it continued to rain and rain and rain at Tiki Tiki Wan. And then one day the rain just stopped. The rain just stopped, and it very much stopped. And it wasn't very long before things started to dry up very quickly. We had almost the complete opposite now. We have a drought. The only places that only kind of the basin areas, the lowlands, kept swamp-like areas, but everything else turned out dry. And being underwater for so long killed so much of the vegetation on the land. The only type of organism or food source for humans now that existed were in these swamps. All right, and these swamps. Held a new type of food source. A new tree evolved, the chimichanga tree. Beautiful chimichanga trees started to grow from the swamps, and they were able to harvest them. To do that, though, they had to be able to go across these swamps to get to the chimichanga trees, to harvest those chimichanga trees. Now, there were still mucky swamps, so the short-arm people, once again, you're not drowning, but you're not able to go get your food. All right. So because the swamps are too dense and your arms are too small to be able to kind of wade across to do that, you're not going to do very well and get these chimichangas. So your population is probably going to decrease. You just can't get the resources you need. Now, medium and long-armed individuals, you can get to it, but something else came along with the swamp, and that is the quasi-virus. The quasi-virus affects larger organisms, and those with longer arms are typically larger organisms. And so as they went into the swamps, the medium-armed people were able to wade through it and not get the quasi-virus, while those who in the long-armed ones were able to get into the swamp, but were unable were able to go into the swamp, but they would capture underneath their fingernails the quasivirus, which would lead to their death. They were not, and it would result in a short lifespan. And so their population is not going to do so well either. So the only ones who were able to do really well here is that middle phenotype. All right. And so what you see is more resources or less resources being taken out by the lower individual or the lower phenotype, and less resources taken by the higher range of phenotype, the extreme. And instead, we are emphasizing that middle area. Those middle individuals have less competition, and thus they're going to do really well. Right? And so we're going to be kind of almost seeing that curve. Instead of it shifting, you're going to see it almost kind of thinning. We have a thinning of the curve where the individuals in the middle do the best. But notice, even though the majority of the population was already in the middle, notice that that range of now most of the population was kind of between 65 and 75. Now it's basically like 69 and 71. That's where the majority of the population is here. We have a slimming of that range into the middle, into that intermediate phenotype. All right. What we're doing is this is what we call, where it kind of comes in on both sides. This is what we call stabilizing natural selection. All right, stabilizing natural selection, where it gets kind of pinched into the middle here. All right, so this is our second type of natural selection. Then, after all these years of drought, heaven forbid, do not judge the citizens of Tiki-Tiki-Wan when they were actually very pleasant or very happy to see rain once again. All right, and they started to rain and rain and rain, and the water's rising up. Immediately, the long arm people knew, well, back to the monkey bars, and they knew they were going to do well, right? Unfortunately, we know that, the medium arm people, over the years of rain and then dry and then rain again, the monkey bars started getting rusted. And now only every third monkey bar was still stable. So only the the greatest extreme or the longest arms are going to do the best. Only the most extreme, because they'll be able to reach out there. The medium arm people are not arms are not long enough anymore. The shorter arm people, knowing that they can have this happen again, they get a little creative. And they use their chimichanga boxes that they used to package their chimichangas and use them as boats. Now, the boxes weren't very big, so only the individuals with small arms were able to fit in them. Ones with medium arms were too big to fit in the boxes, and definitely the ones with long arms are way too big to fit in, but they had the monkey bars. So they were able to survive because they were able to fit in the boxes. And so their population is going to go up. And so now we have almost this inverse curve. Right, where we have a dramatic shift where it's almost like double directional. All right, where actually the middle one is actually going to be the worst, and actually the extreme phenotypes become the most beneficial. All right, in this case here, this is what we call disruptive natural selection. As you might imagine, this changes the population drastically. That's the way I remember disruptive, is just like, this is a drastic change in the population. If this stayed in the scenario in Tiki-Tiki-Wan or Tiki-Tiki-Wan in about 1,000 years, you would probably maybe even find two different species: the tribe of long arms and the tribe of short arms. If we do this enough, we can lead to something called speciation, which is literally the creation of a new species, where they are different species from one another, no longer both humans, but long-armed humanoids and short-armed humanoids. All right. So this is our third type of natural selection, where both extremes are the benefit, and thus, because they have a favorable trait, they can collect the resources, food, or shelter, thus reproduce and pass on that long or short arm trait in this case here. All right. So those are the three types of natural selection I talked about here, and I used my little story to help with that. All right. I know this video is going kind of long, so I'm going to kind of finish it up, but I just want to reemphasize, all right, real quick. Remember, the individual does not evolve. The individual can't evolve. It is the population that we look at. And if the population, alleles in the population change, evolution might have occurred. And the reason why evolution occurs is because of natural selection. Favorable traits are more likely to, those organisms who have favorable traits are more likely to survive and pass down that trait. No organism adapts. That word adapting to an organism, no one, the long arm people didn't purposely get long arms. Their parents had long arms and their parents had long arms, and it just happened to be beneficial for them. No organism adapts, like changes to the environment. It's just those who were lucky enough to be for that situation are able to survive and do well. And those who were unlucky, given the circumstances, are not going to do well. All right. And there's three different ways that can happen based on this range of phenotypes. All right. All right. That's pretty good enough. That's a pretty good enough lecture for me. And I hope you enjoyed the story Tiki Tiki One, because it won't be the last time we talk about Tiki Tiki One. Otherwise, go back and watch it again if you need to talk about the three different types: directional, stabilizing, and disruptive types of natural selection. Otherwise, good luck, and may the science be with you.